Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some people seem to help others more than others, and why that help often goes to people they know? Well, today we're diving into a study that shows how what we pay attention to can actually shape who we decide to help. This sounds like a mouthful, but it boils down to a super interesting question. We know people tend to help those in their own group more than strangers. But if we learn from our actions, why don't we learn to help everyone equally if it brings good results? This study's big idea is that we don't always learn the full story because we don't always pay attention to all the consequences of our choices. So, how did they test this mind-bending idea? They gathered a huge number of people, over 11,000 in total, and had them do a bunch of decision-making tasks. Imagine you are in charge of a company and you have some extra money to give away. You have to choose between giving it to your employees for their pensions, which helps your close-knit team, or donating it to a charity helping children in poverty far away. Here is the sneaky part. After they made a choice, the researchers would show them what happened, but they wouldn't show them everything. Sometimes they'd only highlight how their decision affected their employees. Other times, they'd only highlight how it affected the kids in the charity, and in a control group, they'd show something else, or just a neutral summary. Then, after seeing this selective information, they'd get to make another decision. The big question was whether seeing only one side of the story would change how they acted next time. And boy, did it! When people were shown how their donation helped the kids in the charity, they were more likely to donate to that charity again. It is like their brain learned, hey, this good thing happened because I gave money here. But here is the flip side. When they were only shown how their choice helped their own employees, they became even more likely to stick with helping just their own group. A behavior called parochialism. They learned to be parochial, meaning looking out for their own group more. This effect wasn't just a one-time thing. When people made multiple decisions, the gap between those who focused on the outgroup and those who focused on the ingroup grew bigger and bigger. It is like their learning path started to split. When they crunched all the numbers from all the experiments, they found clear results. Focusing on the outgroup increased donations by a good amount compared to the control group. Focusing on the ingroup actually decreased donations to the outgroup compared to the control. The difference between focusing on the outgroup and focusing on the ingroup was even bigger. Think of it like this. Imagine a dial for how much you help outsiders. Showing you the good that happens when you help outsiders nudges the dial up. Showing you the good that happens when you help insiders nudges the dial down. So, why does this happen? They looked into it and found that feelings play a role. When people were shown how their actions affected the outgroup, they felt more empathy, that feeling of understanding and sharing someone else's emotions. This empathy seemed to be a key way that paying attention to the outgroup's needs made them more likely to help them later. It's like empathy acted as a messenger, telling their brain, this is important, feel this, and help. The main takeaway, how much we help others and who we help, isn't fixed. It is shaped by what we pay attention to when we learn about the results of our actions. Let's talk about this. This study is super cool because it takes a very complex behavior, prosociality, and shows how a seemingly simple mechanism like selective attention can have a big impact. It explains why, even when we have good intentions, our actions might not always be as fair or as impactful as they could be. The paper highlighted a puzzle about charitable giving. Many people donate repeatedly, but their donation habits don't always change to become more effective. They might keep donating to the same places, even if other charities could do much more good with the same amount of money. This study suggests that a big reason for this is that we're not paying attention to the right thing. They're saying that we might be missing the learning opportunity because our attention is either stuck on our own group's benefits or simply not focused on the impact on distant others. It is like having a spotlight, and you are only shining it on one part of the stage. You miss the drama happening in the shadows. They used a few different tricks to manipulate attention. One was information asymmetry, where people literally only got told about the outcome for one group. Another was visual salience, where all the info was there, but one part was highlighted. And in later experiments, they used queuing over multiple rounds. It's great that they use different ways to get people to pay attention because it makes the results stronger. The sheer number of people involved, over 11,000, is impressive. This makes the findings much more reliable. The effect sizes are described as small to medium. Now, in everyday language, small might sound insignificant, but in research, especially with so many people, these are really meaningful. A 4% increase in donations to the outgroup or a 2.5% decrease when focusing on the Ingroup might not sound like much, but it is a consistent shift in behavior driven by attention. One of the most fascinating parts is this asymmetry they found. When they focused people's attention on their own group, it pretty reliably made them less likely to help outsiders later. But when they focused attention on outsiders, it didn't always make them more likely to help outsiders compared to the control group. It is like it is easier to reinforce existing biases than to overcome them. Think of it like trying to roll a ball uphill versus downhill. It's much easier to push it down. The finding about empathy is also key. It suggests that paying attention to the suffering or well-being of others, particularly those we don't typically focus on, can activate our emotional responses, which then drives our learning and behavior. This points to a pathway. Attention leads to empathy, which leads to learning and then to helping, though they note it is only part of the story, suggesting that cognitive factors might also play a role. Now, what are the limitations? They couldn't directly measure where people were looking or how long they looked at the information. They inferred attention based on the manipulation. Also, the real-world scenarios were still hypothetical. While they saw some generalization to a dictator game, it wasn't always strong. So, what is next? They suggest using tools like eye tracking to really see how attention works. And they want to use more complex computer models to understand the learning process better. They also wonder if these effects would hold up in high-stakes real-world situations and in different cultures. What does this mean for us? It has big implications for how we think about charity, news reporting, and even parenting. If news outlets habitually focus on local impacts, they might be inadvertently strengthening our in-group biases. If charities want to encourage more effective giving, they might need to find ways to make the impact on distant beneficiaries more salient, not just by giving more information, but by directing our attention to it. And for parents, being mindful of what consequences you highlight to your children could shape their future altruism. This research is a powerful reminder that our attention is a limited resource, and where we direct it can profoundly shape our moral compass and our willingness to help others. Thanks for watching RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this interesting, hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more deep dives into the fascinating world of psychology. See you next time.